Spider-Man 2099 fights the Hulk and gets dominated. Check this out. So this story takes place in the aftermath of the Spider-Verse event in Marvel Comics. How fortuitous, given the release of Across the Spider-Verse. So as you guys know, or at least may know from the main Spider-Verse event in Marvel Comics, the way this worked is you had all the different Spider-Man across the multiverse teaming up to face off against a group called the Inheritors, who quite literally travel around the multiverse, kill Spider-Man, and then absorb their power into themselves. So at the end of this story, Miguel O'Hara was supposed to go back to Earth 928, his home reality, also known as Marvel 2099. The difference here is that he ended up going to a different universe instead. Specifically, when he arrives here, the entirety of Nueva York has just been completely and totally obliterated, right? It's just like this post-apocalyptic landscape. And even he doesn't really even know what's going on here, right? Like for him, it's a complete and total astonishment because his initial thought is something popped off while I was away and the whole of everything has been destroyed. And so what's so crazy is that as he's here and he's navigating this area, he's suddenly attacked by a couple of different guys. Now, something to understand about Miguel O'Hara is that while he does have spider powers, his powers are not really the result of a traditional Spider-Man, which is to say, bitten by a radioactive spider. Instead, he's more the result of like gene splicing, right? Like the DNA of a spider being spliced with his own that gives him different abilities. Now, Marvel did this for the purpose of creating a version of Spider-Man that was not identical to Peter Parker, and they could justify why he would have varying degrees of powers. This was done back in the 90s, right? So before like Miles Morales or those characters where Marvel could just arbitrarily give them whatever powers they wanted to based on the bite of a spider and nobody would really bat an eye or ask any questions. But the thing about this is that where he's attacked, given the technological nature of his suit, of course he's able to deal with this and absorb this pretty quickly. So him just kind of being quote unquote knocked out or taken out is really more just a way to kind of lull these guys into a false sense of security and then learn some information. But as soon as he attacks these guys, one of the things to know about Miguel O'Hara is that the way that you saw him depicted in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is not wrong. He's very, very similar to that in Marvel Comics. He's pretty hardcore, right? Peter Parker is like the hopeful, we can win no matter what guys type Spider-Man. Miguel O'Hara is kind of like, I mean, look, right, you want to put hands on, we can put hands on, but I promise you, I'm going to make it your last fight. You know what I mean? Like, it's that kind of a thing, right? Like, the guy's just pretty brutal. So that's why even when he's talking to these guys, while he doesn't usually overtly kill, he threatens these guys with the idea that he will kill them, right? Like, talking in a pretty intense way, right? And so what he starts asking them here is, what's going on here, right? What happened in this place? And what they really reveal here is that one, they're what's called scanners, meaning anybody who's familiar with that term knows exactly where Miguel O'Hara is right now. The second thing is that when they talk about the idea of where home is, they refer to it as dystopia, which gives us the second clue, right? Again, I'm basically telling you, but I will tell you like directly here in a second because it's amazing. So the thing about this is he literally tells them, tell me, like, take me to where you come from, right? Take me to dystopia, take me to this place. And so as they lead him back to really their own little village, the entirety of this place has more or less just been crushed, right? Like there's no one here anymore. Everybody's seemingly bailed out and there's no real indication as to why. Nobody knows where they went. They quite literally just vanished. And so following that, they intend to really travel to dystopia only to be set upon by like these soldiers. Right now, Miguel O'Hara does his normal Spider-Man thing, right? Bobbing and weaving, dodging, that kind of thing, being able to take these guys out. And then it's just this clap that comes out of nowhere, right? This sonic hit that just sends him flying. And when he comes to, he sees Maestro standing over him. Now, here's the thing, right? Maestro Hulk. Oh my God, dude, this guy's so amazing. So I know a lot of you all may not be overly familiar with Maestro. If you are, bear with me for a second because I imagine we'll be getting new viewers who are not. The Maestro Hulk comes from a reality called Future Imperfect. And in fact, this is the universe that Miguel O'Hara is in right now. The nature of Future Imperfect, which when it was initially introduced, basically humanity ended up destroying itself, right? Like nuclear war broke out. And where we didn't really know exactly how that landscape unfolded, more recently in Marvel Comics with Maestro War and Pax and stories like that, they've basically expanded that whole universe to show us that like Hercules, for example, was one of the few people who survived. MODOK had survived as well, then Maestro Hulk killed him, things along those lines. But the cool thing about this story and really what goes on here is that Maestro does not know that it's not Peter Parker. Now, again, a lot of this is because with Maestro's own history, once he emerged from the entirety of his stasis and then immediately went forward, he was really kind of killing people who got in his way, things like that. He ended up killing Hercules and then seizing control of really the city of Dystopia and then made himself an absolute ruler, that kind of thing. So he didn't exactly know who all was out there. And in fact, you will see evidence to indicate that Peter Parker should be dead, which is actually the reason why Maestro is shocked about everything that's going on here. But again, he doesn't know that it's Miguel O'Hara, a Spider-Man from a different reality. He thinks it's Peter. And in fact, Miguel O'Hara just kind of allows him to believe that. Now, the funny thing about this is that Maestro starts to put things together relatively fast, right? The difference in Miguel O'Hara's outfit, things along those lines. And while he doesn't know it's Miguel, he still thinks it's Peter. And so in that moment, he just kind of asks the question, how in the world did you get here? And he assumes that he time traveled. So one of the big differences between Maestro Hulk and the traditional Incredible Hulk is that Maestro is incredibly intelligent, right? He is wildly intelligent, but vastly capable. Now, the way he was originally depicted back in the Peter David days is that he's the answer to the question of the Incredible Hulk just basically absorbing all this nuclear radiation and just kind of going nuts. Again, that whole philosophy's kind of changed with like Maestro Warren Pax, things like that. He's just incredibly strong, right? And also incredibly smart. But him deducing this information and believing that this is Peter Parker from the past, he simply says, if you've time traveled, then here's what's gonna happen. If you want to live, once you get back to where it is you're supposed to go, you're gonna bring me with you, right? You're gonna take me back to your time period. And that's when Miguel O'Hara kind of cracks a joke and says, sure, I'll get right on that, right? I'll grab my time machine and I'll be right back here. And then Maestro immediately attacks him. Now, the reason why is because Maestro is exceedingly proud and exceedingly arrogant, and he does not suffer fools. And so where Miguel O'Hara is like cracking jokes and doing the traditional Peter Parker thing, Maestro's not having any of it. Now, to a degree, Miguel O'Hara is kind of aware of who Maestro is. He's heard the name, and in fact, he's basically been on teams that have encountered Maestro in some capacity. But in a one-on-one, knockdown, drag-out fight between himself and Maestro, that's never happened. And in fact, even here, it's not happening. One of the things he points out is how fast and how strong Maestro is. But even when Hulk just absolutely crushes Miguel and just starts throwing him around, right, like a rag doll, one of the things that Miguel comments on is he's not even trying his hardest. He's not even, like, he's literally holding back. He's not punching as hard as he can. He's not moving as fast as he can. If anything, he's making sport of Miguel. And a lot of that's because he can, right? Whenever you saw Maestro, for example, fighting like Professor Hulk in the Future Imperfect story, literally when Professor Hulk went to the future and fought Maestro, that was a knockdown, drag-out fight. And it was a pretty intense fight that almost laid waste to the entirety of Dystopia. This is child's play. This is just Maestro enjoying himself. But the fact that he's able to overcome Miguel O'Hara that easily, right, with seemingly the greatest of ease, right, with almost no effort, it's crazy, because as soon as he takes this guy out, he tells his forces, bring him with me, right? Like, bring him to Dystopia. Now, of course, as Miguel is along for the ride, kind of tied down to a horse, the question he asks here is, what happened in this place, right? Like, what in the world went on? And the response of Maestro is, it was all basically because of Alchemax. Now, the reason that matters here, and this is something that wasn't really focused on at all in Spider-Man 2099 with regards to Across the Spider-Verse, is that within the comics, Alchemax is both the main enemy of the 2099 universe, but also the company that Miguel O'Hara works for. Now, he works for the company, but works as Spider-Man trying to bring down the corrupt actions of the company. So basically kind of trying to destroy his employer. And it makes sense, right? Like, what better way to take out your enemy than to operate right under their nose? And so when this happens, Miguel really comes to this realization that even if this is not the exact same reality, Alchemax is the same across every universe, and that it would presumably only be a matter of time before they engaged in some campaign in his home reality that would lead to the destruction of everything. So if anything, it adds even a greater sense of urgency for him to find a way to destroy Alchemax. Now, the other part of this is that for these two scanners that were there with Miguel, they asked the question of Maestro, like, where did you put our people at? Like, what happened to our people? And Maestro's like, oh, they're right over here, my friend. Let me show you. And what the Maestro did is he basically killed them all and then strung them all up on what used to be the Hollywood sign, but now says Maestro, right? So he just kind of used them as decoration. And then he decides to add 2 more pieces by helping these guys finish with all their living. And he does that by crushing their heads and then stringing them up. Maestro's dark, guys. He is dark and twisted. He's amazing at the same time, but he's incredibly dark and twisted. Now, what ends up happening is, of course, once Miguel is taken to Dystopia, he's basically thrown into a cell by Maestro. And Maestro even goes as far as to say, there is a person here that I think the 2 of you might be able to work together to find some kind of solution to everything that's going on, only for him to encounter Strange from the 2099 universe. Now, one of the things to know about the Marvel 2099 landscape, right, like Earth 928, is that because this is the future, you do have characters that you're familiar with, but in name only. For example, you have Punisher 2099. That's not Frank Castle. You have Venom 2099. And you also have Strange 2099. Now again, this is not Stephen Strange. In fact, it's a girl named Jeannie. But what ends up going on is you have a meeting between Maestro and what's basically his Grand Regent or Vizier, if you want to call it that, more of like an advisor than anything else. And literally this guy asks the question, is it a good idea to have like this Spider-Man here? Shouldn't we just kill this guy? Like, what's your main motivation? What's your goal? But the response of Maestro is, it's none of your business. Now, a lot of this is because Maestro, again, sees virtually everybody within Dystopia as below him in some capacity. Some of this is due to just straight physical strength, and some of it's also due to the level of power he possesses and the role he plays. But regardless, Strange ends up meeting and really kind of having this conversation with Miguel and says, look, I'm chained up here. I do have this circle of magical protection, but in order for me to be able to heal you, you have to get close enough, which he does, right? Like he gets his finger close enough, he kind of shoots webbing at her, which creates a link, and then that basically heals him. After that, he basically breaks the bonds that keep her chained up, so now she can be free. And then in turn, once a guard shows up asking questions on what's going on, Miguel attacks him, and then they basically end up breaking their way out of the prison. Now, once this happens, what Jeannie tells him is that if he needs to get back to his reality, because the goal of Miguel is to get back to 2015 so he can figure out what went wrong in the time travel hijinks that can get him back to his normal reality. Now, one of the things about Spider-Verse is that this was taking place at the same time as the incursions in Marvel Comics, the collapse of all universes. This is the reason why in Spider-Verse, when Spider-Man UK, William Braddock, right, part of the Captain Britain Corps, when he was supposed to go back to his universe, it was just a giant empty void because the incursions had destroyed his reality. There was nowhere for him to go. Now, the incursions were an amazing story. You'll find that link down in the comment section as well. I'll have my staff put both of those videos, the Incredible Hulk playlist and the Incursions playlist, because it's just, the incursions are so cool. But the thing about this is that with the multiverse collapsing the way that it was, universes crashing into each other, it was no longer a straight line jumping from one universe to the next, because the reality is that your universe either may not be there or it may have moved, right? And so with all that happening, it was very easy for Miguel O'Hara to be sent back to his reality, but then end up missing a turn. And so the result of this is that once they get to this room, Jeannie tells him inside this room is a time travel platform, right? Like there is a platform here that can get you to where you need to go. Now, of course, this is Dr. Doom's time platform. But the thing here is that once these soldiers are all kind of taken care of, right, the ones who come running in, trying to stop Miguel and Jeannie and so on and so forth, and they effectively get into this room, it's not just the time platform that's there, it's the trophy room of Maestro. And so once they end up grabbing the time platform, and then Miguel O'Hara basically intends to activate it and go back to his current time, suddenly Jeannie's killed, right? Just like stabbed through the gut, only for us to find out that what Maestro had been doing here is Maestro had basically been hiding himself, right? That what he ended up doing was using the hood of Parker Robbins. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Parker Robbins, also known as the Hood in Marvel Comics, he's going to be the villain in the, the Riri Williams series. This guy is kind of like a C-list villain at best. But the kicker to Parker Robbins is that he always has like some kind of ace up his sleeve, and he's done all kinds of crazy things. But the hood that he has allows him to be invisible, which is exactly what Maestro was doing, killing Jeannie on the spot, and then in turn, fighting against Miguel O'Hara. Now, he just starts slapping this guy around, but again, the funny thing about Miguel is he starts using different artifacts in this room at his disposal, kind of in this round too. A good example is that he uses a piece of the Iron Man armor from the Hulkbuster suit to blast Maestro and kind of take Maestro out in the moment, right? Now, the reason why I say this is cool and the reason why this is kind of possible here is because the nature of the Hulkbuster suit, the way it was designed by really Iron Man, especially when he got to Mark II, was for that suit to be able to take on World Breaker Hulk. Now, for people who would look at this, they would kind of say, okay, how in the world does an Iron Man suit take out a version of Hulk this powerful? Well, lest we forget, right, assuming that the future imperfect reality mirrors the main Marvel Universe reality up until the point when everything popped off with Alchemax, I don't even know if we're given a definitive year, that basically this suit was designed for the same purpose as it was in the main Marvel Universe during World War Hulk. It was designed to confront and to overpower, or at least to remain equal in power to World Breaker Hulk. Maestro himself is not as powerful as World Breaker Hulk. He's incredibly capable, but not as powerful. And so what this looks like in this moment is that given the power of the suit, which still operates, which is a testament to Tony Stark's ingenuity, it's enough to kill Maestro on the spot, right? Like literally incinerate this guy. And so following that, Miguel O'Hara activates the time travel portal, jumps through, and then lands in 2015. Switch back over to Future Imperfect, right? The whole thing was a ruse. The whole thing was a trick by Maestro, which is how smart he is. One, this was never really Jeannie as Strange. She's long since been possessed by the demon that had at one point taken over her body. It was never her operating of her own accord. Number two, Maestro's not dead. Right? He was never dead. I mean, that injury hurt, don't get me wrong, right? That shot from the Worldbreaker armor absolutely hurt, but it wasn't enough to kill him. And in fact, what ends up happening is that with Miguel O'Hara jumping through the portal and basically powering it and so on and so forth, now it gives Maestro the ability to use it. And that's exactly what he does. He uses the time platform and jumps back to Albuquerque on December 25th in presumably 2015. Now, the reason why this matters and what really actually kind of sucks about this is Maestro just kind of takes off. He will reappear in all new X Factor issue number 20 from volume 3, which also came out in 2015. And then that's it, right? Because Secret Wars happened almost immediately after this. So Maestro is just kind of gone. He doesn't reappear until the Old Man Logan story post Secret Wars, which was an amazing story, right? It was great. Old Man Logan fights the Hulk. It was great. You'll find a link to that in the comment section as well. So we'll have 3 playlists for you to choose from, right? If you want to watch any one of them. The Incredible Hulk, the Incursions playlist, and then Old Man Logan. I would watch all 3, right? Because they're awesome videos. Anyway, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.